Okay, match one. We are on the draw. Our hand is very capable. We have 3 removal spells and a creature. We will hope to draw more creatures, but for now this is pretty good. Bloodfell Caves, turn 1. It's a very interesting play, maybe some sort of graveyard or delve deck that's Jund colors. Don't typically see black and red together, as far as I know. Could also be some sort of aggro deck with Bump in the Nights. Opponent has no play on turn 1 or 2, so probably not an aggro deck. We get to hold open Victim of Night, and if our opponent does nothing, or if they play something that can't be killed by Victim of Night, we can cycle our Unearth away. Although with a Rager and a Rats in hand, it might be good to... Ooh. Opponent has a Chittering Rats of their own. Okay. So most likely we're playing against some sort of mono black control variant that's splashing red for some reason. I actually don't want to get rid of this Unearth. I think being able to get back a Chittering Rats that we trade off will be very valuable, so I'm going to not cycle it away, at least for now. I do run the risk of not hitting my land drops because of it, but I think the possibility of doubling up on a Chittering Rats or maybe a Phyrexian Rager is worth it. And our opponent is apparently splashing red for at least Firebolt. So we need to keep in mind that that's in the graveyard and can be flashed back later for 4 and a red. And we take our damage from the Chittering Rats. Okay. I'm going to start off with Phyrexian Rager, and the reason for that is if I draw a land, I can unearth this turn, but if I do it the other way around, I can't play both for sure. Okay, we did not draw a land, so we're missing our 4th land drop. Opponent has a Diabolic Edict. That's not typically played by black decks. Generally they have Chainer's Edict or Guess Verdict. They're also playing an artifact land. That could be just a discard to Wrench Mine that we have in our sideboard and other decks sometimes play. Or there could be a specific artifact synergy in the deck that we need to watch out for. So I'm not exactly sure what to expect from our opponent. They probably have Grey Merchants of Asphodel if they're playing Chittering Rats, but probably shouldn't assume anything. So on this turn we can Chainers plus Victim. Both of the creatures die to Victim. Neither of them are zombies. We have a rat on the left and a horror on the right. Quambage Witches is not going to be very good here. I think I'll start off with a Chainer's Edict, and then I'll unearth my Chittering Rats. I don't just want to remove their 2 creatures from the board this turn, because I'd like to start getting some devotion of my own online. And I also want to get this Chittering Rats back while our opponent still has cards in hand to put back on top of their library. Our Rats gets disfigured, but the effect still resolves. Alright, our opponent is to 2 cards in hand, Firebolt in the graveyard that they can flash back, and our Rats on the field. I like our position. We get to play Witches plus Victim of Night, and then followed up with either Tendrils or more creatures or a Grey Merchant. We'll start off by trying to kill this Chittering Rats, make sure they don't have anything weird like Undying Evil, which gives a creature Undying until end of turn. We might need to shoot it again with Victim of Night, if they had that. Then we'll play our Witches, which I don't expect to be very good, but they also don't die to Firebolt, and they provide 2 devotion to Gary, so I'm definitely going to play them. Chainer's Edict. Okay, we lose the Witches. We're not really keeping any devotion around for Gary. And a Radiant Fountain. So this is almost certainly a control deck, or a deck that thinks it's a control deck of some sort if they're playing a Radiant Fountain. And a 2-color deck that needs its mana fixing. Okay, well we have nothing to do here, so I'm going to cycle this Barrenmoor to start. I could play it to have Grey Merchant next turn, but that doesn't seem very good to me. I'd rather find action spells. Okay, draw another Tendrils. I'm going to pop out the graveyards here so we can see the flashback spells. They have 1 Firebolt and 1 Chainer's Edict, and we have 1 Chainer's Edict of our own. Our opponent also has Blightning. That's very interesting to keep in mind that they can make us discard cards. Okay. I guess I'll get rid of Hmm. They could have Gurmag Anglers of their own, in which case the Victim of Night gets worse. Yeah, I guess I'll get rid of a Victim of Night and a Tendrils and keep a Tendrils and a Grey Merchant. Okay. Chittering Rats. I never say no to a Chittering Rats. If our opponent has a removal spell, they're going to use it right now, so they don't have to put it back on top of their library, presumably. Okay. We get to attack for 2. We're all the way down to 9, but we do have a Tendrils and a Gary in hand, so we can gain some life and hopefully not die. Our opponent's deck is very interesting because they're playing a card like Blightning over a card like Wrenchmind, and that indicates that they want to deal damage to us. However, they're also playing Radiant Fountain, which indicates that they're a control deck and they want the game to go on longer. So I'm really not sure what to think of their deck. Some sort of black-red mid-range value. It looks like a lot of fun, though. Alright, Swamp. We're going to go ahead and play Grey Merchant. Uses our mana the best. We're not going to hold up Tendrils because they might not even play a creature. Pass the turn. So with regards to Blightning and Chittering Rats being in our opponent's deck, we have to keep very much in mind of the cards we have in hand. If we can empty our hand, we should, because we might lose our cards. However, we also don't want to empty our hand so fast and leave exactly 2 valuable cards in our hand that could get lightninged. Alright, our opponent is lightning bolting our 2/2. They still have a Chainer's Edict in the yard, and we still have a Chainer's Edict in the yard. Interesting. Our opponent has Augur of Skulls, which they can regenerate or sacrifice during their upkeep to make us discard 2. So they have a lot of discard in their deck. I'm going to play this first so I gain extra life off of Tendrils of Corruption if I use it here. Alright, and it looks like our opponent is going to regenerate the Augur of Skulls to save 2 damage. So we will take this opportunity to Tendrils of Corruption the creature, because otherwise they might just sacrifice the Augur of Skulls and make us discard Tendrils of Corruption anyway. And if we try to do it in response then, they would have the mana up to regenerate on their turn. It would be wasted. So our opponent has 0 cards in hand, but they're drawing now. And it looks like they have a Gurmag Angler, leaving a Chainer's Edict in their yard for flashing back. Alright, if we draw a land of our own, we can flash back our Chainer's Edict and keep attacking. We draw a Chittering Rats. That's a pretty horrible draw right now since our opponent doesn't have cards in hand. But I think I need to cast it just as a 2/2 anyway, because I don't believe our opponent's going to hold their own cards in hand. If they draw a creature, they're going to play it out. If they draw a removal spell, they're going to use it. I'm planning on not blocking this Angler if it attacks, because I want to get in damage. Our opponent plays a Bloodfell Caves pre-combat. So our opponent is 1 land away from their Chainer's Edict flashback, just like we are. Alright, taking 5, going down to 13. Grey Merchant would be a good draw here, as would a land. Alright, a land. So we'll go ahead and flash back our Chainer's Edict, get rid of this Gurmag Angler, attack for 2. Our opponent might draw a land of their own, in which case we'll have to sacrifice our Chittering Rats. But we are definitely ahead right now. I don't know if we can stay that way. Sign in Blood. Alright, that costs our opponent some life, but could pull them back ahead if they draw something good here. Oubliette. So yeah, this looks very much like a deck of our own, except they're splashing Lightning and Firebolt, which doesn't seem too bad. Our Grey Merchant is going away. And they have a Rakdos Carnarium, presumably picking up their Radiant Fountain. Correct. So next turn they're going to gain 2 life and at least be able to flash back Chainer's Edict, even if they draw a basic land. Alright, we have to play this Swamp out, and we can't pretend that we have something because our opponent has Chittering Rats in their deck. We don't want to get got by a Rats putting a Swamp back on top of our deck. That would be pretty devastating. So we'll just play that out and pass. Alright, we knew our opponent had that. They go back up to 10. Another Sign in Blood. Yeah, this game's not looking good for us. Our opponent is pulling ahead in card advantage, and ooh, especially with this Firebolt, removing our creature and probably removing our next 2 toughness creature. Yeah, so they have a card in hand, a Firebolt, and a Chainer's Edict in the yard, and we have nothing in hand, nothing to flash back. Chittering Rats. Okay, well that's a start. If our opponent can't cast a spell, we get to get up a card in card advantage. Perfect. So it's probably just another land, because anything else they could probably cast at this point. Yep, there's the land. They weren't able to play it last turn because they had the Radiant Fountain they picked up from the Carnarium. Our opponent gets to choose to either flashback Firebolt or Chainer's Edict to get rid of this. Probably the Firebolt. And our creature goes away. We're definitely going to want to bring in our control cards for this matchup. I'm not sure exactly which ones. Alright, because of Chittering Rats, because of discard, I'm just going to play out whatever I get into my hand. I'm not going to try to save things to build up devotion before I play a Grey Merchant. I cannot afford to. Our opponent has another Sign in Blood. If we were the ones drawing Sign in Bloods, we would definitely be winning. We both had life to work with, and they're effectively drawing 2 cards a turn for the past couple of turns. Alright, opponent's flashing back the Chainer's Edict we knew they had. They're down to 5 life, so if we draw a Pestilence or another Gary, we could be able to kill them quickly. Sign in Blood. We could have also targeted this at our opponent if we could get them down to 2 instead of 5. Alright. That was not a bad sequence of draws. Our opponent is going to have something, otherwise we win in 2 attacks. They have a Grey Merchant of their own, so yes, this is almost a mirror match, but they have Lightning and Firebolt. We do get to attack here. And we'll see whether our opponent calls our bluff or not. If they decide to not call our bluff and just let us through and trade 2 damage for 2 damage, we will win the damage race, so it makes sense that they're doing this. Alright, I'm going to disfigure the Grey Merchant, get it off the field. Gets rid of some devotion, lets us actually get in for 2 damage a turn. Our opponent has Diabolic Edict, getting rid of our Grey Merchant. So it's a good thing we waited till after we dealt our combat damage before to disfigure. Let's see who can draw their way out of this first. Unearth Phyrexian Rager. It's very good for our opponent. Into a Radiant Fountain. So they're getting out of burn range as well. This is not great for us. Basic Swamp. Okay. That's not good. If we draw Pestilence, that'd be incredible, because we could get rid of the Phyrexian Rager and take our opponent down to 2. Which would mean any Sign in Blood of their own, or of ours, would be lethal. Gurmag Angler. Well, that's perfectly fine. I'm just going to fully pay for this. There's no real reason not to. And pass. And our opponent has to draw a removal spell now. Our opponent drew a land. So it looks like we may just win this game. Let's see if they chump this turn or plan on chump blocking the next turn. Oh, actually, I'm going to take that choice away from them. I'm going to oubliette their creature. I'm going to attack for 5. Now, if they draw their 4th Sign in Blood, it takes them down to a very, very dangerous range. And they have to draw exactly a removal spell here to be in good shape. Chittering Rats. Okay, so our opponent drew a chump blocker. Buys them another turn. Let's see if we get a removal spell for this Rats to end it right now. We do. Perfect. Alright, and we take down game 1. So our opponent has Firebolts. Oh, they're also splashing Lightning Bolt. I forgot that. Firebolts, Lightning Bolts, Blightning, Augur of Skulls. And beyond that, they're very close to a mono black devotion deck. So it's very much a control matchup. Our opponent has some more burn than we do, so we need to be careful not to get down too low in life. Against Blightning, I like having Duress. Against Oubliette, I like having Duress, but this doesn't stop Chittering Rats or Grey Merchant, so I'm not sure I want all three. I don't want the Choking Sands. There's not enough Carnariums there to worry about trying to get our opponent by destroying their bounce land. Pestilence could be interesting. I don't think they have any way to get rid of it, besides getting rid of our creatures. Font of Return, they don't seem to have any way to remove our graveyard, so this would be very good for a long drawn-out control matchup like the one we just had. There's also the problem of Wrench Mind against opposing anglers, because our opponent can get an early angler by the result of us making them discard cards and fueling their delve. So what's good here? What's bad here is what I mean to say. So the witches seem pretty horrible. There's no targets for them that we know of. Tendrils seems good. We want to gain life versus them. I definitely want these Font of Returns. I'm going to bring both in. Then we need one more card. Another Pestilence, a Duress, or a Wrench Mind. I think I'm going to get rid of Victim of Night as well, both of them, because they don't get rid of Grey Merchant or Gurmag Angler. So they're just worse than other spells in this case. I think I'm going to grab 2 Duress and a Wrench Mind, and try to fight this card advantage war with those and with the Font of Returns, and see if we can win. Alright, game 2, we're on the draw. We have Sign in Blood on turn 2 into Chittering Rats or Oubliette on turn 3. We can also Chainer's Edict turn 2 instead of Sign in Blood if we desire. So we're definitely going to keep this hand, and just hope to draw lands at some point. Our opponent has no Duress of their own turn 1. I'm not sure whether they brought them in or not. Another Unearth that we may or may not end up cycling. If we can get a Rats back with it, we definitely want to do that. We saw no Artifact Synergy, so I think the Vault of Whispers is just anti-Wrench Mind tech, which might have been a reason for me to bring in more Duresses and no Wrench Minds at all. We're going to have to discard if we do this. That doesn't sound great. Maybe I shouldn't be targeting myself with Sign in Blood right now. Yeah, you know what? I'm not going to do it. I'm going to be a little bit more disciplined, and I'm just going to pass and wait for the Sign in Blood. Card advantage seems extremely important in this matchup, and I don't want to just throw away a card for no value. I don't want to Sign in Blood just to draw one card. Our opponent cycling their Unearth. We may do the same, depending on what we see our opponent do this turn. Though once again, getting back our Rats is extremely valuable to us. Our opponent found their red source, and they're hitting us with Blightning. Okay, let's discard a Chainer's Edict, and how about Chittering Rats? We're going to go ahead and unearth that Chittering Rats, and then Sign in Blood on the same turn to try to start getting ahead in card advantage. It uses our mana up pretty well. I know I could also normally cast the Rats and then let it die in combat and then unearth it, but just using exactly 3 mana this turn seemed interesting, so. And this also lets us keep all our removal on hand for their creatures. Keep their devotion down so their Grey Merchants aren't as scary as ours are. Okay, and we pass the turn. And see what our opponent can do about that. Our opponent Oubliette's our Chittering Rats. We have no way to get rid of Oubliette, so they have 2 devotion forever now, which is unfortunate for us. Alright, Wrench Mine. Well, this is going to be excellent unless our opponent has an artifact land in hand. I'm going to go ahead and pop out these graveyards so we can see what they discard and also remind ourselves that we have Chainer's Edict in the yard. They discard Grey Merchant and Disfigure. So their 3rd card is probably better than both of those. Could be a Blightning, could be a Chittering Rats, or a Phyrexian Rager. Any of those would be reasonable. Alright, do I want to cycle this Baron Moor or play it? I think I'm going to have to play it here. Between the Chainer's Edict in my graveyard and in my hand, I really want to get up to 7 mana so I can get value from them at some point. I also want to play this Grey Merchant at some point. Alright, so the card our opponent kept was not Blightning, or they would have just used it, I believe. Probably a removal spell of some kind. Do I want to save this Grey Merchant? I think I do. I want to save it at least until this Oubliette is down so it drains for more. If our opponent has a removal spell in hand, it doesn't cost them anything to just play it on a Grey Merchant. They can also do a trick where they play it in response to Grey Merchant's trigger, and then when Grey Merchant's trigger goes to check our Devotion to Black, it's 0. So we don't even get the enter the battlefield effect in that case. It's an interesting case where our opponent can fizzle an activated ability by killing the creature that's attached to it, only because it counts Devotion. Opponent keeps playing land and passing, so whatever card they kept is very, very likely a removal spell at this point. They probably don't have Tendrils in their deck because they're not playing Swamps. I didn't think about that before. So it could be a Victim of Night, it could be a Chainer's Edict, or something like that. I'm going to just play a land and keep on passing. We're going to just keep on doing this dance of making land drops back and forth till someone decides to make a move. Alright, there's a Grey Merchant. And I'm actually going to go ahead and do the trick now to save myself some life. I'm going to Tendrils of Corruption Grey Merchant in response to the trigger, so it only drains for 2 instead of for 4. I know I would also like to get this Oubliette down, so that our Grey Merchant counts more Devotion, but we had mana up to do it, so I thought it was a good idea to do it. Swamp. Alright, pass the turn. We start drawing three more Sign-in Bloods that are somewhere in the deck. We can start getting the heading card advantage again, which would be great. We draw a Disfigure. So our hand is chock full of removal. We can Flashback an Edict, play an Edict, Flashback an Edict, Oubliette, and Disfigure. So our opponent's not going to be killing us with creatures anytime soon. We just need to draw a couple of Chittering Rats or Phyrexian Ragers to start putting some pressure on the board and forcing them to remove them. They have their own Phyrexian Rager. Okay. I'm going to try to Oubliette that. I believe our opponent's not going to have a way to get rid of Oubliette, just like we don't have a way to get rid of theirs. And this lets us get Devotion on the battlefield. Perfect. Once again, I'm saving this Grey Merchant. Now that I have an Oubliette, I have 4 Devotion, but I'm pretty sure our opponent is chock full of removal spells, so I'd like to be able to play this Grey Merchant after I've played 2 creatures. Alright, they Grim Harvest Grey Merchant back to their hand. And Grim Harvest is a very interesting keyword, recover. When a creature is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, you may pay the recover cost and return this card from your graveyard to your hand. Otherwise, exile it. So we need to try to figure out a way to, whenever their creature dies, they not have 3 mana up to be able to recover Grim Harvest and continue getting value off of it. Our opponent could play a Grey Merchant of their own, but they chose not to. Duress. Well, that's pretty perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and nab a removal spell out of our opponent's hand using this, and also get a look and see what else is going on. Wretched Banquet. Destroy target creature if it has the least power or is tied for the least power among creatures on the battlefield. An Oubliette, a Lightning Bolt, Grey Merchant, and a Vault of Whispers. So I think the scariest card to us here is Oubliette. There's nothing really that we can do about it. It's another permanent 2 Devotion for them. And I think I'm just going to get rid of it. I'm going to go ahead and play this Grey Merchant. Our opponent can either Wretched Banquet it, or... well, they can't bolt it. They can Wretched Banquet it on their turn. But that's better than them being able to kill it on our turn. Lets them use up their mana on a turn where they can't play creatures instead. Although using up their mana is a generous term. I'm going to go ahead and disfigure this rat. Put Chainer's Edict back on top of my library. And I forgot about the Grim Harvest and I made a mistake. I should have waited to see if our opponent would tap out of being able to use Grim Harvest. But they got it back to their hand because they were playing correctly. Put this Chainer's Edict back on top. Pass the turn. Our opponent decides not to Wretched Banquet or Grey Merchant, even though they had the mana up for it, which is interesting. I'm going to go ahead and let our opponent do the trick of getting back the rats with their spell, and then playing the rats to put my Chainer's Edict back on top. And the reason for that is I don't want to just Chainer's Edict them for no value, just to get out of Chittering Rat's range. I'd rather make them use their turn doing this. Unfortunately, they do have a land drop, so they can do this, and then when I get rid of the rats with the Edict, they'll be able to get Grim Harvest back again. So Grim Harvest is another way you can recur your creatures. It's similar to Font of Return. I'm not sure which one is better. There's a wide variety of black spells that do the exact same thing. Between Font of Return, Grim Harvest, and there's also a black X spell that returns X creature cards from your graveyard to your hand, and I'm not sure what the best sideboard option is. But Grim Harvest is proving very good for our opponents right now, so maybe that's the best one. So they have a Grim Harvest in hand, they can get back a Grey Merchant, Chittering Rats is not as valuable now that I'm Hellbent. And they also have a full hand of 6 total cards, at least one of which is a Bolt. They have an Angler of their own. We have 2 Chainer's Edicts in the yard, but we can only play 1 a turn. So they'll presumably play another creature to protect this from an Edict. And there's the Grey Merchant. So we know they have a Bolt left in hand, and we know we need to draw something. Duress. Alright, well that's not nothing. Get a fresh look at our opponent's hand. Alright, I think I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this Grim Harvest for good now. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to have them discard it, and then I'm going to Chainer's Edict them, and the Recover is going to trigger, and they're not going to be able to pay the 3. So I leave them with a Bolt, a Wretched Banquet, and a Bloodfell Caves. There's the trigger, and Grim Harvest gets exiled. There's the Wretched Banquet that we knew that they had. And if our opponent can't play another creature here, their Angler will die to our Chainer's Edict flashback, which is pretty good. So we know they have a Bolt in hand. We don't know their other card. Font of Return was a very good draw? No, it was not. We only have 1 creature card in our graveyard. Because the one other one that we had was put under an oubliette. It wasn't just killed. We're going to play it anyway, though, for mana efficiency. And hopefully we'll be able to get back more than just 1 Gary. Alright, our opponent has a Bolt, whatever else is in their hand, and a fresh draw. We have more devotion than they do, but it's their turn. They have more life, they have more cards. They still have more life, now they have even more cards. We may be losing this game too. Luckily we won game 1, so that won't be the end of the match. Chainer's Edict. That's not horrible. Keeps us from dying for a while. We really need to draw creatures though, so we can play them, get them killed, and then get them back with Font of Return. Chittering Rats. Alright, our opponent is getting us. Edict's going back. They also have a Rager. So on our turn, we're going to Edict them and Flashback Edict to get rid of both their creatures. So we don't get attacked, and so they don't have Devotion for Gary. Hopefully our opponent does not have any more Grim Harvest. Alright, our opponent's passed in turn. They have 4 more cards than us, so I don't feel great about our chances, but we're going to do what we can. Start off with Sign in Blood, Phyrexian Rager, and an Unearth. That's not horrible. We really can't afford to go too much lower on life, though. Ooh, a Grey Merchant. Beautiful. So our opponent's probably going to bolt our Phyrexian Rager right now to get rid of 1 more Devotion to Gary. Then we gain 5, they lose 5. Okay. So we don't know any cards in our opponent's hand, now that they got rid of that bolt. We have Unearth in our hand for our Rager. We have Font of Return for a Rager, a Grey Merchant, and probably this Grey Merchant that's on the field that's going to die soon. And there it is. Now they have their own Chainer's Edict. Chittering Rats. This is an interesting game. Alright, we'll start by unearthing Phyrexian Rager. See what we draw. Hopefully a removal spell. Or another creature. Disfigure. Well, that's not bad. Well, we can't disfigure and get back our Grey Merchants and play one this turn, so we'll just pass the turn. And see what our opponent does. We're going to Firebolt our Phyrexian Rager. Okay. So now they have a Firebolt and an Edict in the yard. So they have a million removal spells, but we kind of have a million creatures due to this Font of Return. Can't afford to take damage. I'm going to get rid of this Chittering Rats right now. Alright. I'm not going to wait for the... Well, actually it's 3 creatures. It's not 4 creatures with this. I'm getting full value. Okay. This life gain from Grey Merchant might just be enough to swing it back. Especially given that we just drew another one. Even though our opponent has a ton of removal spells. Yep, and we win the match. So our opponent, even though they could get rid of our creatures, we could go Phyrexian Rager, Grey Merchant. They Firebolt the Rager and Chainer's Edict. They even have enough mana for that. But then we get the other Grey Merchant down. And between having, let's see, 5 Devotion and then 4 Devotion, that would drain them for 9. And I think our opponent just couldn't keep up at that point. And they didn't even know about the next Grey Merchant that definitely would have ended it. Alright, match 1 was fun. I like their take on Mono Black Devotion splashing red. I have not seen that before, but it looks fun to try out. And we are on to match 2.